With the full base set of Elestrals finally revealed, I wanted to make this video series discussing every single card in there. I'm organizing this by element and then finally generic cards, so that'll be 6 total videos. In each video, I'll be discussing each of the cards that I group in those elements / generic, and I'll be going over my general thoughts of those cards, its meta viability both in base set as well as in the future, and some fun factors about the card, because I really want to highlight that even if it's not meta, there's a lot of cool stuff you can do about it at the casual scene. So if this interests you, let's get right into it. So rounding off the base set review, got the generic cards here, and they're all exclusively runes. So let's just kind of jump right into it, as we've got some great cards right now and some cards that are of note for the future. I want to start off talking about the cards that will definitely be seeing meta play, and that's Nectar of the Gods, Drops of Leads, Ambrosia, Shield of Achilles, and Pandora's Box. So 5 of them here. Nectar of the Gods, just a simple draw 2 for 2 spirits. Decks will like this for card advantage, as a lot of decks don't have built-in card advantage, or they're very limited to what they do. So a generic draw 2 is just quite nice, especially in the early game. So this card will definitely see play for sure. How many copies? 2 to 3, I think, will be pretty common, just because in the late game, Nectar of the Gods feels so bad. You don't really want to be using spirits to draw the cards. You just want to draw the cards you need to answer the board. But still, 2 cards in the early game is phenomenal. So in terms of meta viability, very meta right now. I definitely think this has some potential moving forward, or a lot of potential moving forward. It's so generic, it will really just need a draw engine to power creep it for this card to be lost as just the generic draw engine. So definitely great there. And for fun strategies will like this card as well, just to dig more deeper into their pieces to accomplish whatever strategy they want. So this one's a really easy one to talk about. Next up, I've got Drops of Leads here. This one's just a better mulligan, which is really, really nice here. And I think it does also help out some other decks that maybe have some cards in hand they don't need. They want to refresh their hand into some different cards. And it's nice that it also replaces itself as well. So you're not actually losing out on any card advantage here, which is really strong as well. So I think Drops of Leads and Nectar might be run in tandem, but at the same time, I do think that some decks in the long run might prefer more just refreshing their hand to different cards as opposed to just a blanket draw 2. And that's more if they have more dead cards at hand at certain times, while decks that just might need the cards themselves, but all their cards are more or less live, might prefer Nectar of the Gods. So I don't think this is just strictly better than Nectar of the Gods. I think right now there's a good chance that these cards might be run together just for better mulligan, just to be able to get better cards in general. Just set yourself up stronger than your opponent, even if it does cost quite a bit of spirits. But I think in the long run, this card will be more for decks that, again, just have more dead cards in hand that need the refresh to find the cards they can use, and might be opted to run over Nectar of the Gods due to how expensive it is. Just more of a specific kind of draw engine overall. So is this card meta? I think so. I think at least decks might want to run this as a one-of to refresh the hand from time to time. I do quite like it for that. Definitely has potential viability as we get different decks that aren't so focused around the 1 spirit Elestrals. Maybe like the 2s are a lot of times dead in hand, or 3s, and this card will be phenomenal for those decks. And same thing goes for fun strategies, just a phenomenal card for a lot of fun strategies that might have a lot of dead cards and might need to cycle to more live cards that you can use. So really like Drops of Leads there. Glad to see some draw correction engines that cover a plethora of different decks, have different strengths and weaknesses and such. I think that's really great for this game. Moving over to Ambrosia here, just a simple recovery card. And the reason this one's so powerful is not so much for the 3 spirits you recover, though that's definitely very strong right now, as we're in such a grindy game. Sometimes just getting the extra 3 is what the little oomph you need to outlast your opponent long enough. But also, just be able to correct your spirits in your spirit deck. It just means that you can throw away certain spirits in the early game that you don't need, and you can just Ambrosia them back when you do need them. And that's quite nice for multi-element decks, and I do really like Ambrosia for that reason. That's why I say that don't play this unless you absolutely need to for recovery reasons. Otherwise, just save it for when you need specific spirits back. And yeah, Ambrosia, definitely a meta card. In terms of meta viability in the long run, I do think the time is limited on this card, because you're giving up one whole card to recover spirits. You're not having any proactive impact on your strategy, the board state, what's in your hand, like all that. It's just a simple recover 3. And again, I think the game is just at such a pace right now where those 3 spirits and correcting them have such great value for just letting you close out the game, that you're fine giving up the one card in hand for it, even though sometimes it hurts just to draw 3 Ambrosia because they give you no impact on board whatsoever. So I really like this card, but again, for future meta viability, if the meta gets faster, this card is just a dead card and doesn't really matter. I don't think the probability is good enough, and you'd rather just have cards to try to keep up. And even if the meta gets slower, I imagine the spirit count might just not be worth it. You'd rather have a card that has better impact on the board or pluses you more. So funny enough, I just think this meta is perfect for this card. And if we ever get back to this point, you might see it see play. But other than that, I could just see maybe this one living more in a fun space to help correct spirits for some ambitious decks, or maybe a deck that burns out spirits too quickly needs a bit of extra recovery. That's where I think Ambrosia is going to live for the long run. Shield of Achilles is a phenomenal counter rune right now, as it does not target me, it bypasses anything with target protection, and it just sets your opponent back in tempo a lot with this card. Quite nice. So I really like it for that fact, though admittedly between this card and like Poison Tip Arrow, sometimes Poison Tip Arrow's destruction is a bit better, as then you have to deal with the card later on. So I think that whole fact that it doesn't target isn't too relevant right now, but will be really relevant in the future. But at the same time, Shield of Achilles just stopping the attack as opposed to Poison Tip Arrow, which still allows it. There's some differences there. So therefore, I think these two really Shield with Poison Tip Arrow is what makes them so strong. And individually, they each have their own use cases. But still, just right now with the pace of the game, just any way to disrupt your opponent's tempo is phenomenal. And this card, while Poison Tip Arrow puts your opponent back one card, this card also protects one of your cards, meaning I think it's more tempo efficient than Poison Tip Arrow. And of course, it's super punishing on 2 or 3 Spirit Elestrals right now, especially when your opponent works so hard, or even you work so hard to build up to them just to get shielded. Hurts, though it does cost you a lot of spirits, or whoever activates this card, a lot of spirits to do so. But a lot of times that's worth it because a lot of times they can just blow you out the game. Anyway, so all in all, this card is very meta right now. One of the few answers we have to attacking Elestrals with a huge tempo impact. This card definitely has meta staying power, especially as we get more cards that maybe have target protection. This is a great way to answer it as well. And of course, for fun strategies, this card's a must-have to help them just keep up in general with various decks and such, especially if they have trouble attacking over stuff. You need a way to impact the board, and Shield is such a great way to do it. Pandora's Box, unlike these other cards I've listed, won't be really a main deck card. I think this is a side deck card, but I think there's enough going on right now with especially like Full Tempest. This card will be nice to disrupt those plays, as it pretty much just stops the Ascension, which is crucial for stuff like Full Tempest. And if someone brings in like Pandora as well, this card I think is the best way to stop Pandora right now. Just to be able to negate them from being able to go into that. And then the Mill 2 is nice. I don't think it's super relevant, but I think it's more just stopping your opponent from being able to make that Ascension is great. And this card does have some other viabilities past that. I just think stopping the Ascension is really where you're going to want to use it right now. So I think it is meta right now, but it's side deck meta to counter those decks, as it's just a very good way to do so. It definitely has some future viability as we get more Surge and Ascension strategies to disrupt combos and whatnot. So I think this card will really live in the side deck for a while now. I think sometimes, especially if you get more metas, it might drop as those kind of cards. There might be no cards in the meta that need this card, but the minute we get those back, Pandora's probably be added back in, unless we get a better card. And I also think it's super crucial for fun decks, just to be able to answer other fun decks, as we'll see a lot more Ascension strategies exist in that space, or really the special Ascensions, I should say, and Pandora's Box is great for disrupting those. Moving on to 3 cards I think you should definitely keep in mind and watch out for. I've got Helios' Chariot Ride, Altar of Stars, and Rise from the Ashes. It looks like in meta they're not going to be too impactful, but especially in the fun sphere, these cards are interesting and definitely have some potential. Helios' Chariot Ride, just being able to shut your opponent down from runes for 1 turn, seems pretty powerful, especially if you have like a big threat on board. You can just shut down your opponent from being able to most likely effectively answer that, and that seems pretty strong. I don't think meta really cares about this card too much, but I think in fun strategies, especially ones that might want to throw out a ton of runes to protect the Elestrals and such, or disrupt your plays, Helios' Chariot Ride can just buy an extra turn to just blow out your opponent, and that's really strong. That's definitely a very skill-intensive card, though, knowing when to use it and when not to. Meta viability, I don't think it's meta right now. I don't think there's anything that you really want to mass disrupt with Helios' Chariot Ride for 2 spirits. But in terms of future meta viability, if we get combo decks, oh yeah, this card's going to see play, because I imagine those combos will center around runes a lot. And in terms of fun play, again, I think this is where this card you really need to keep in mind when you've got a ton of decks that want to throw up stuff like the artifacts and divine runes to protect your, say, Leonite, for example, and you just want a way to be able to slow your opponent down a turn to give you another turn to answer it. And this card's quite nice for that. Moving over to Altar of Stars, this one really needs a lot of testing because it's a very interesting effect that when you read it, you might think, okay, but there's a lot of inherent value that can be had with this card. Nexus 1 Spirit, especially, we've got a ton of Elestrals that when they receive a Spirit, do something. That could be pretty interesting. Disrupting an opponent's attack nonetheless with this card, slowing them down. It's only one attack, but that's still interesting. It just kind of depends on what cards we have here. And I think there's some strategies that might benefit from this card. If you have like your things set up, your cards set up to do so, you can just disrupt your opponent's attack, maybe drawing an extra card with Clovey, burn your opponent for one with Toxion, just little stuff like that. Pop a rune before it even gets to your turn with P-Gust. Since there's no main phase 2 in this game, your opponent has to set them before the battle phase. There's just a lot of neat interactions with this one, and I felt there's some room to be explored. Do I think it's meta? No, I don't. I don't think there's enough payoff for this card to warrant running it. You'd rather just run Tsunami and Water. Is this card something to watch out for in the future of meta? Yes, I do think that this card will see some really interesting interaction that might do something in meta. So it definitely has the potential there. But I think that potential will definitely be actualized in fun decks, and I think definitely has some room for testing right now. And you should definitely keep this card in mind because really its potential is based on whatever cards are Nexusing Spirits to, and just the ability on a counter room to disrupt your opponent's plays as well is also quite nice. Finally, I want to talk from Rise from the Ashes. It's really expensive, but being able to just revive an Elestral sometimes lets you just swing the game to a really weird strategy. I've had it happen to me before. I think there's a lot of potential in that. Get back your big, like you just imagine your opponent, you set up your big boss, your opponent has the answer to it, but it might be multiple cards. You rise from bring it back, it's a lot of spirits, but your opponent might not be able to answer it yet again. And that's where the power of this card lies. Is it very meta right now? No, I don't think so. I think it's too expensive, especially just one Spirit Elestrals. But once you look, let me back up. Future meta viability, maybe if we have a more slower or like high impact card meta that rise from scenario, just being able to resurrect something your opponent dealt with and they can't necessarily do, that seems really powerful. This card will definitely exist in the fun space. I've seen it work before. It's just super powerful and super obnoxious if your opponent can't deal with something you've played twice. It also helps enable some ascension strategies. It's just really powerful overall. And it really needs that 3 cost as well. So this definitely will enable a ton of really fun stuff in the fun space, and it just takes some really creative people to be able to utilize this card well. And usually I see this as a one of, because really you've done your plays and then you just go rise from bring it back. I think the only thing I would have to say for this, and this is both for meta viability in the future and fun viability, we get more ways to discard or get really powerful Elestrals into the underworld. Watch out for this card because that's a really easy way to bring them back when you're not ready for it. Rounding off these, I have 4 cards: Circle the Sky, Necklace of Harmonia, Charon's Obol, and Golden Apple. The first 2, starting with Circle the Skies here, I think is a card that's interesting and has some potential, but I think overall probably will be outclassed by stuff. It can move 2 spirits around, which is quite nice to enable stuff like Astrabbit, not Rotaya, the Clovey, what's another good one I covered? Toxion's another good one. Just ways, P-Gust to disrupt runes. Just move spirits around, whether receive spirits can affect you, cycle it to something else. That's quite interesting. Can be interesting for combo decks, but at the same time, you really need that setup. So I don't know if you can afford the card space, as a lot of times this card might just be dead in hand. But with that being said, though, meta, I don't think it's meta. I don't think it will ever be meta unless we're in like a real combo meta where you need to pass spirits onto stuff. But really, I really think this card shines is in fun strategies. Again, just being able to move spirits around. You can correct spirits on certain Elestrals to enable some multicolor shenanigans. The easy answers, such as adding spirits such as Clovey, Toxion, I always forget the names, P-Gust, that has some potential there as well. And it's nice that it cycles themselves. And honestly, just Nexus has technically limitless potential depending on what cards we get. So I think there's going to be a lot of interesting stuff going on with Circle of the Skies. but I think it will mostly exist in the fun space. Moving over to Necklace of Harmonia, a very powerful 5 attack buff, but you take 2 damage each turn until you can't pay, and then Necklace destroys itself. This one's interesting. Some decks might want this, but you really need to be able to swarm your opponent and beat them ASAP since you're taking 2 spirits off of this card itself. And that can be difficult, to say the least. So, all in all, this kind of needs the right deck to run. I think most decks, especially right now, are just too slow to really make use of it, and you just kill yourself with the card. I know that there is also talks about, like, you could enchant it onto the opponent and force them to expend 2 spirits, and that's also interesting, but you're also giving them the ability to attack over stuff, and since there's no way to lock them from attacking right now, it's going to be a bit hard to keep up on advantage on board, especially without using additional spirits. So all in all, it's an interesting card. Meta, not right now. Meta viability in the future, I don't think so. But as a fun strategy, this one has some potential for sure. If we get the right card combinations or a fast enough deck, this card will be very interesting to potentially run in the deck as well. And it's also one of those cards that you really want to use the 2 spirits to get the 5 attack, get that kind of impact. And you don't necessarily care if your opponent answers it because it's penalizing you anyway, which is interesting. So yeah, it definitely has some fun viability. We'll just see once we get certain cards that really support this card. It definitely needs those kind of synergies to be able to, I think, be worthwhile running. These final 2 cards here, I definitely think have potential in the future. Charon's Obol is an interesting draw engine that it's a counter rune, but every time an Elestral is destroyed in battle, you draw a card. And that's interesting. Right away, I think if we get a deck that can swarm the board a lot better, you can flip up this card, and what happens is one of 2 things. Either your opponent just answers your board and you draw a ton. Now, granted, it has to be with attacks. So that's more for when we get more board swarming type effects. So I think right now, 1 spirit for 1 isn't bad, but I think you'd rather run the other draw engines. But it's just, again, it would need more swarm because then, of course, if your opponent just throws out 1 Celestial attacks over 1, you really need your opponent to be attacking multiple times to make this card worth it. Although you can also save it for your turn. That could be also pretty interesting. Swarm the board, attack your opponent's Celestials multiple times. So it's just when an Celestial is destroyed in battle, that's quite interesting. Pandora deck, this is interesting. Maybe like a Destruction Chain type thing, where you just kind of attack or destroy, bring it back. Even just crashing, you draw 2. That's pretty interesting. It's just an alternate draw engine, which, while right now I just don't think is worth it, it's very interesting. I realize I forgot the second scenario. Second scenario is you flip it up, your opponent doesn't want to give you the card, so they just stop attacking, and you get to keep your Elestrals on board, which is pretty neat. Kind of like a Max C from Yu-Gi-Oh! Slower than Max C, but still nonetheless. So it definitely needs the right deck to run it, but I'm glad this kind of card exists, as once we get, again, more swarm strategies, that, and maybe it just would depend on more, are you getting stuff destroyed by battle or by card effect more? So that's the other part of it, but it's nice to see alternate draw engines that support different strategies. It might be better for different strategies. So all in all, is it meta right now? No. It does not fit in any decks that are currently meta or looking to be meta. Future meta viability? I do think so. I think there is that chance where we have a lot of crashing, a lot of combat, and this card will be really nice just to recuperate some resources as well, and will be run. It's nice that is only 1 spirit as well. And then finally, for fun viability, again, we're definitely going to see some swarm decks, some maybe crash decks that, like our Hydrake, Twindra, and Pantera stuff, where this card will be very nice as well for those decks. I love seeing these alternate draw engines, so definitely keep this one in mind as we get more swarm decks. Finally, we got Golden Apple of Discord here, a very interesting card for some hand destruction and milling. Not too impactful right now, but as we get more discard synergies, hand destruction synergies, this card I definitely think we'll see some more play and some more consideration. And it also really helps that it synergizes with Latigan so far. Latigan just tacks a destruction, any card destruction onto Golden Apple, and that's really strong. So I really do like this card for that reason. Right now, though, in terms of meta, not meta. In terms of future meta viability, it just depends on what support we get for Latigan and other strategies. So it definitely has some, but I think this card will really exist in the fun space to help discard strategies, to have the hand destruction deck, to help the fruits deck with Latigan as it gets more support. And that's super interesting for this card, and I love to see that sort of thing. This card definitely has some potential, not so much because it, with its effect itself, it's a very blanket effect, but we see those synergies around the card as well that makes this card very interesting. Also forgot to mention, you do have to discard a card from hand, so that's also interesting for some self-discard to set up for some stuff. It's not amazing right now, but could be relevant later on if you get more stuff that wants to resurrect from the underworld. Discard a 3-drop Rise From, discard some extra amp ups. I think we need better options than those, but like you have cards that we see right now that don't mind being discarded for those sort of strategies, meaning that there's something potential there as well. So those are all the generic runes that come out of base set 1. Some interesting stuff here, some great cards that are definitely going to see meta play, some interesting cards that definitely don't forget about as they have some interesting utilities, and some cards that definitely will probably see them play in the future that are interesting. Like there's a lot of potential behind these generic cards because they are generic. They can be run anywhere. Though I will say we might just get better generic cards, as I'm sure each set we're going to get quite a few as well. And there's only so many we can run. So just look out for the synergies for these cards, and you're going to see some interesting stuff. I'm sure of that as well. That's just true with any generic card in most games. So with that being said, though, if you've missed all the other parts from the Base Set review, I'll have the playlist linked up above in a card down below in the description. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and comment down below. Do you agree or disagree with any of my points? Do you have any of your own that I did not make? I love the discussion there, as this is just my opinion. I don't think I'll be right on everything here, so I appreciate the discussion as it's a lot of fun and I enjoy it and helps. Really, I think it helps all of us become better players as well. And of course, if you've been enjoying my content, please consider subscribing and turn on the notification bell so you're notified when I upload more content, as especially as this game gets closer to release. And when it does release, I'm going to be wanting to make a lot of content. Even now, I just want to test stuff, upload some deck pros, more discussions and such. I've been having a blast playing Elestrals, interacting with the community, so you can expect some more content coming out from me real soon.